The courtroom was dead silent. Every eye in the room was on her as she stood there, her hands shaking, but her voice steady. The judge leaned forward, curious, while the lawyers exchanged glances, unsure of what was coming next. This wasn't just another custody hearing. This was something much bigger. Welcome back to part 2 of this unbelievable story. If you've been following from the beginning, you know how intense things have already gotten. But today, things take an even crazier turn, as the girl everyone thought had no voice finally speaks up, leaving the courtroom completely shocked. Before we dive into what happened, let me take you back to how we got here. Her mom had always been controlling, some might even say manipulative. From the outside, everything seemed perfect. The house, the family dinners, the smiles in the holiday pictures. But behind closed doors, it was a different story. Her mom made decisions that affected everyone, but especially her dad. Over time, she had pushed him out of their lives more and more. Little by little, he lost any say in his daughter's life, until one day, he lost his parental rights altogether. The mom had convinced the court that he was unfit, telling lies, and twisting facts to paint him as the bad guy. And in the end, it worked. The dad was heartbroken. He had tried everything to stay in his daughter's life, but now, legally, he had no rights to see her, to talk to her, to even be in her life. It was every parent's worst nightmare. But the truth was far more complicated than anyone in that courtroom had imagined. The dad wasn't the villain her mom made him out to be. And the girl? She had been living with the weight of this secret for years. She knew things that no one else did. Things that would change everything if they ever came to light. That day in court, she was tired of staying silent. She knew her mom had been lying, manipulating, and controlling everything. But could she prove it? Would anyone believe her? When she walked into the courtroom, she wasn't just there to support her dad. She was there to speak her truth. But no one expected what would happen next. She pulled something from her backpack. Something that would leave everyone in the room stunned. What she had to show would shake the entire case to its core. Her mom's expression shifted, her confident smirk slowly fading as she realized her daughter wasn't going to play along anymore. The attorneys whispered urgently to each other, unsure of what was coming. Even the judge sat up straighter in his chair, his eyes fixed on the girl. It was at that moment that everyone knew. Whatever she was about to reveal, it was going to change everything. But what exactly did she have? How would it turn the case around? Would it be enough to undo the damage her mom had caused and give her dad a fighting chance? The tension in the room was unbearable. Everyone was waiting, hanging on her next word, her next move. And just when it seemed like she was about to say something, the video ended. We'll pick up right where we left off in part 3. Trust me, you're not going to want to miss what happens next. Stay tuned. As she stood there, gripping the papers in her hand, the courtroom buzzed with nervous energy. Everyone's eyes were fixed on her, wondering what she had just pulled out of her backpack. Her mum, who had been so sure of herself moments ago, shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her face growing pale. For the first time in years, the power seemed to shift away from her. The girl looked down at the papers. They were proof that things weren't as simple as her mum had made them seem. But this wasn't just about papers. It was about years of feeling unheard, misunderstood, and torn between two parents who were supposed to protect her. Her mom's manipulation had gone too far, and now it was time to set things straight. The tension had been building for so long. Her dad had tried everything to stay involved in her life, but her mom always found a way to block him. It was heartbreaking to watch. The girl remembered the nights she would overhear her dad on the phone, his voice breaking, as he begged for just a few more minutes to speak with her. Her mom, however, was always quick to cut the conversation short, claiming it was for the best. But was it really? The more the girl thought about it, the more she realized how much her mom had been controlling everything. Not just her relationship with her dad, but her entire life. She wasn't allowed to talk about him at home, wasn't allowed to express how much she missed him, and anytime she mentioned him, her mom would find a way to turn it into a guilt trip. It was as if her mom had rewritten history, making her believe her dad didn't care, when in reality, he had been fighting all along. Size. Papers she held were just one piece of the puzzle. They contained emails, messages, and notes that showed how her mom had been manipulating the system to make sure her dad couldn't be a part of her life. But there was more to it than just documents. There were also recordings, conversations her mom didn't know had been captured. In these recordings, her mom admitted to things that would completely flip the narrative she had spent years building. As the girl looked up, her eyes met her dad's. He was sitting across the room, his expression a mix of hope and fear. He had no idea what she was about to reveal, but she could see in his eyes that he was trusting her, relying on her to help tell the truth. And then, her gaze shifted to her mom. The woman who had always appeared so strong, so in control, was now fidgeting in her seat, her confidence draining by the second. For years, her mom had gotten away with it all, convincing the court, the lawyers, even friends and family, that she was the perfect parent, while her dad was made out to be someone unfit. But now, the truth was so close to coming out, and she could sense her mom's fear. The courtroom waited in silence as the girl took a deep breath. She knew this was it. Everything she had been holding inside for so long, everything she had been too scared to say, was about to come spilling out. She started to speak, her voice trembling at first, but growing stronger with each word. She explained how her mom had manipulated the system to take away her dad's parental rights, how she had been forced to lie, to hide things, to go along with her mom's version of the story. But the worst part, the emotional toll it had taken on her. She had spent years feeling trapped, stuck in the middle of a battle she didn't want to fight, and now she wasn't going to stay silent anymore. As she spoke, the room seemed to shift. The judge's expression softened, as if he was seeing things in a new light. The lawyers exchanged tense glances, realizing this wasn't going to go the way they had expected. And her mom looked like she wanted to disappear, her face pale, and her hands clenched tightly on the table in front of her. The girl continued, pulling out the evidence one by one. Each document, each recording, painted a picture of the real story, the story her mom had worked so hard to bury. She revealed how her dad had always been there, trying to stay in her life, even when the system seemed stacked against him. How he had written letters she was never allowed to see, how he had fought for her, even when it seemed impossible. With every piece of evidence she revealed, the tension in the room grew thicker. It was becoming clear to everyone that things weren't as black and white as her mom had made them seem. The truth was out, and it wasn't going to be easy to ignore. As she approached the climax of her story, the girl felt a weight lift off her shoulders. For so long, she had been carrying the burden of her mom's lies. But now it was all out in the open. There was no going back. The judge leaned forward, clearly intrigued by the evidence, while her dad's lawyer began to furiously take notes. Her mom's lawyer, on the other hand, was visibly sweating, clearly thrown off by this unexpected turn of events. And then, just as the girl was about to reveal the most shocking piece of evidence yet, the court adjourned for a short break. Everyone was left on edge, wondering what would come next. The girl's mom rushed out of the courtroom, her face flushed with panic, while her dad sat in stunned silence. clearly overwhelmed by what had just happened. The tension was at its peak, and it felt like the entire case was about to explode. But there was still more to come. What the girl had revealed so far was only the beginning. The next part of her story was going to turn everything upside down. What would happen when the court reconvened? Would the truth finally set her dad free? Or would her mom find a way to twist things again? Stay tuned for part 3, where we'll see how this incredible story unfolds. When the court reconvened, the air in the room was thick with anticipation. Everyone had returned to their seats, but this time, the tension had shifted. The girl sat quietly beside her dad, who still seemed stunned by everything she had revealed before the break. Her mom, on the other hand, looked nervous, her confidence slipping away with each passing moment. It was clear that the balance of power had shifted. The girl knew the next step was the most important. The evidence she had shown so far had raised questions, but what she was about to reveal would bring the truth to light completely. She reached into her backpack one last time and pulled out a small USB drive. The courtroom watched as she handed it to her dad's lawyer, who quickly plugged it into his laptop. The video on the drive was everything. It was a recording of a conversation the girl had secretly captured between her mum and a close friend. In the video, her mum admitted to fabricating evidence, lying in court, and intentionally keeping her daughter away from her dad to punish him after their messy divorce. She bragged about how easy it had been to convince the courts, how she had manipulated her daughter into believing her dad didn't care, and how she never planned on letting him be part of her life again. As the video played, the room fell completely silent. Everyone was glued to the screen, unable to believe what they were hearing. The girl's mom sat frozen in her seat, her face drained of color. She looked like she wanted to run, but there was nowhere to go. When the video ended, the courtroomer remained still for a moment, processing what they had just witnessed. The judge leaned back in his chair, clearly disturbed by what had been revealed. He took a long pause before speaking, his voice calm but firm. He thanked the girl for her bravery in coming forward and acknowledged how difficult it must have been to expose her own mother. The judge then ordered an immediate investigation into the mother's actions, as well as a reconsideration of the father's parental rights. The girl's dad sat beside her, tears in his eyes. He had spent years fighting for this moment, and now, finally, the truth had come out. The judge gave him a chance to speak, and when he stood, he didn't talk about anger or resentment. Instead, he spoke about how much he loved his daughter, how he had never given up on her, and how he hoped they could begin to rebuild their relationship now that the truth was out. Her mom, on the other hand, had no defense. She sat quietly, her once overconfident demeanor completely shattered. There was no denying the evidence, the lies, the manipulation. It was all exposed, and now it was time for her to face the consequences of her actions. The resolution wasn't just about the court case. For the girl, it was about finally feeling free. For so long, she had felt trapped in a situation she couldn't control, torn between two parents who were supposed to be her protectors. Now, she had spoken her truth, and though it was painful, it brought her a sense of relief she had never known before. She and her dad hugged tightly, their relationship finally on the path to healing. The court's ruling was clear. Her dad's parental rights were restored, and her mom was ordered to seek counseling, with further consequences to be determined after the investigation. But more importantly, the girl knew she had taken control of her own story. She was no longer just a pawn in her mom's games. She had found her voice, and she had used it to make things right. As they left the courtroom, her dad put his arm around her, and for the first time in years, they talked about the future, a future where they could reconnect, where they could heal the wounds caused by the past. It wasn't going to be easy, but they were both ready to try. The girl looked back at the courthouse one last time, feeling a weight lift off her shoulders. This chapter of her life was finally closing, and though the journey had been long and painful, she knew it had made her stronger. She had stood up for the truth, and in the end, that was all that mattered. So, what's the takeaway from this story? Sometimes the people we trust the most can deceive us, but the truth has a way of coming out no matter how deeply it's buried. And for anyone out there who feels unheard or powerless, remember, your voice matters.